I'm Vicki Davis, Martin County Supervisor of Elections. Thank you for joining us for Project Vote History. Local residents reflect on cherished memories they have gained over the years regarding public service, the election process, and the importance of voting. And joining me today is Sandy Thurlow. And Sandy, I'm so excited you're here to share some of our local history and your experience. You were sharing with me that your husband, Tom, of course, is a native Stewart resident, born and raised here, correct? No?
He was a Yankee. He moved down here as a teenager.
Okay.
He wishes he was from here.
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he does. Well, I'm glad you corrected me, but share with our listeners and viewers about you and Tom registering to vote here in Martin County.
Well, we were married in 1962, and when I came to town, he was headed into the Air Force. And he said, well, we need to register to vote because this would be our legal residence, even though we went to California. Mm-hmm. And he said, you have to register as a Democrat or you can't vote. So I did. Mm-hmm. And so that's the way things were for a number of years. But then when we came back, about 1965, things were changing.
Yes, they gradually changed. And I shared in another episode in 1938 there were 1,880 registered voters in Martin County. 1,800 were registered with the Democratic Party and 80 were registered as Republicans. But it did start changing in the 60s, and in the 80s, in 1980, is when the real flip came and there were more registered Republicans than Democrats within the county. But, you know, military, we still have, of course, military and overseas voters. And according to Florida law, we are required to mail ballots to our military voters and overseas voters 45 days prior to every election. I'm sure you didn't have that luxury. Tom didn't back in the 60s, but it's now federal law 45 days before.
Wow.
Yes. So what in all of your research here in Martin County, and I know you voted back in the 60s when you and Tom came back from the military, and I'm sure you went to vote, and at that time it was the lever voting machines that we had here in Martin County. Can you describe any of your experiences going to vote here in Martin County?
Oh yes, you just went in and you got near this metal thing with levers, and you closed the curtain.
Yes.
And you were in private and you voted. But it's always, even today, there's something, a height of kind of excitement, and that you hope you do it right.
Yes, yes.
Even if it's a paper ballot or a computer or that old-fashioned clanking.
I know.
Metal machine.
And our voters really miss, those that were here during that time, really miss the old lever machines, and they ask many times what happened to them. And the state of New Jersey did purchase some of our old lever machines, and some of them are off the coast in the Atlantic Ocean as an artificial reef. So,
interesting.
Yes, and then of course we have one at the Elliott Museum, and there is one at the elections office. So,
I actually worked at the polls when we used those machines, and I can remember going in back, and
that's where the totals were. Yes, yes, and
you had to do it how many times? Count it 3 times or something?
You know, that was before my time as supervisor, so I don't remember that part. But
laborious.
Yes, yes, and heavy. They weighed about 800 pounds each one. So to have to deliver those to the precincts.
Aren't you glad you came later?
I am glad I came later, but it was fun to vote. Mm-hmm. With that method, yes. And so you remember the time then when the party switched from, the registered voters switched predominantly from Democrat to Republican Party.
Yeah, I noticed it, and then since you gave me that wonderful accounting of things,
voter history.
I double-checked to see, and you had it laid out there so beautifully. But then on the school board, we had a couple of, in 1966, a couple of Republicans, and also I think Mr. Hussey, who was a lawyer from Washington, if I remember correctly, that was a commissioner. He was a Republican, and then it gradually changed. And even some of our old-time Democrats switched parties.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did, in order to vote also. Yeah, and so now in Florida, with us being a closed primary state, parties have to be declared 29 days before an election. So it makes a difference how you're registered to vote.
What I was interesting is just the way I think, oh gosh, I'm an independent person and I vote on issues and people. I'm not really so much into the parties. But then that's a big mistake, because you can't vote at all in a primary, and isn't that important? My gosh, that's the primary vote, isn't it?
It's so true, and so many of our local races are decided in a primary, so it's very important for our voters to realize that to participate and vote for a candidate of their choice, they really need to be registered with that candidate of choice 29 days before a primary election. General elections, it doesn't matter how you're registered.
Can you explain about how the write-in candidate can throw things off?
Sure.
And what that's all about?
Sure. If we have on the ballot a race that contains two or more candidates of one party affiliation, and I'll use the Republican Party as a for instance, because that's how our voters are registered predominantly. If a write-in candidate were to file to run in that race that you have 3 Republicans in, it closes the race down to only Republican voters, and the top vote getter in that primary race then goes on to the ballot, general election ballot, to face off with the write-in candidate. So in Florida, there's a little bit of a caveat. If there are candidates running in a race and they're of the same party and no one else files to run from a different party or as a write-in, then it's open for every registered voter to vote in that race. But if someone else comes in like a write-in, it closes it down, and then only that party can vote in that particular race.
So a write-in doesn't have to get all those petitions?
A write-in does not. That's why their name does not appear on the ballot. They don't pay the fee, and they only appear on a general election ballot. So it's going to say write-in and a line, and for that vote to count, the voter has to write the write-in's name on that line. We get a lot of people in a general election who will vote for Mickey Mouse, they'll vote for Donald Duck. Yes, but they don't count. They're not a qualified write-in candidate. They have to qualify the same way as any other candidate, but they don't pay the fee nor collect petitions.
The big deal, I guess, is to make the election closed or not closed, and it can throw things completely off whether...
That's true. That is very true. Local elections, they often mark a turning point in history, and I don't know if you've noted anything historic as you've done any research with certain elections, if they have made a change within our county at all. I don't know if you can think of anything, any instance.
Well, I mentioned integration when we were talking beforehand, and I really think that the Old South ways probably changed more quickly with the Republican influence, and here in Martin County, we did do such a wonderful job. And I guess the Civil Rights Act was '64, and we didn't get into really having integration for at least 3 more years.
Right.
But that was also when the Republicans came in, and it was a very graceful transition.
Yes.
So that was historic.
Yes, and you're so true. And I was reflecting on that very issue with Alice Luckhart, who also recorded with us as well and shared a lot of election history and trivia. And we were talking about the integrative process. And when I was in high school and 1967 here in Martin County. It was the first year of integration, and you know, we never had an issue. It was such a wonderful transition, and it's just a great place to live.
How interesting that that is your year, because it was pivotal.
It really
was.
was. Yes, yes.
So you experienced that. You lived history.
Yes, true. Very true. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Sandy. I appreciate all that you do for our community, our county at large. You're just a wonderful asset.
Well, it's I admire you so, and thank you for what you do, and do it so well and gracefully.
Well, my pleasure.
Kindly.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
I'm Vicki Davis. Thanks for joining us for an episode of Project Vote History.